Well, what we have here is a project where the client did not want a total. Just do the best you can without taking it all the way down to the bone. Because typically, when we do a total, we replace all of this old burlap and webbing and roll, and we pull all this horsehair off, and we take out the burlap that's underneath it. We take off this back here, this muslin, and all the horsehair and springs that are underneath it. We pull off all of this on the outside and strip it completely to the bone and replace all of it. For instance, these back springs, I didn't do anything to it because they're still pretty much intact. You can see these strings here are still good, and so I know it's holding the springs in place. And you can see some repair that someone had done previously to try to tighten up this old webbing that's back here. And so she doesn't want a whole bunch of work on it, but I did need to put some vertical new webbing on there just to prevent it from getting any worse. Now when it comes to the bottom, I had no choice. I had to completely replace all of the webbing because it was gone. The webbing was shredded, and the springs had nothing to stand on. And so whoever did it before used some metal strapping underneath the old webbing, and that was fine. It did okay, but I had to replace it because the webbing was gone, and the springs would have nothing to be attached to. But putting on the new webbing, as you can see, I overlap it all the way around, and thank goodness this project allows for that, because the bottom of that frame was completely shot and ate up, just like the wood is here. I couldn't have used a standard attachment of staples and blue tacks to do that, so I just wrap it around the front and back, and that is perfectly acceptable. And then, of course, I use the Clinchets clips to attach the base of it, because there was nothing to attach some of these springs because the webbing was gone. And so when I rolled it over, I realized that I was going to have to do a lot more work to it than either one of us wanted to. But it was anticipated. I did get the price for it. And what I did to the top was I left as many of the old strings intact as possible because I wasn't going to retie the whole thing. And I just did a single strand here in the back instead of a double strand, which would come up to the back here and then come across like this and then down the front and then double wrap it like this. I just used a single strand. And as you can see, my spring tie technique is an absolute tried and true spring tie technique that holds everything in place. And this spring tie will never move. Never, ever move. I use that's a poly spring tie, and so I did as much work as a job allowed, and it's going to be fabulous because she's just a little old lady, and she doesn't even sit on it, but I could not just put burlap over the top of collapsed springs and completely untied springs and hope for the best. I have to have this rod here has to be set. It has to be set in some kind of fashion. And the only way to do that is to retie the front. And the only way to retie the front is to have the springs attached to something on the bottom. And so it was a no-brainer. And I knew what I had to do. And it's, and that's just what we consider. It's not a total. A total is stripped to the bone, and it's not just covering up with fabric like I'm probably going to be able to do to this old piece, is just covered up with fabric, because you can see somebody got on the inside and put brand new webbing inside of that old burlap and did a decent job back here of the same thing, so I'm not going to have to do anything. This is all still in one good piece. I'm not going to have to pull any of this off. And so this job is going to be a lot easier. But so I've got to put burlap over the whole thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch the burlap to these springs. I'm going to run stitches through it. And that'll hold the springs in place long after this old stuff finally gives way. When these finally give way, these old rotted ties in here. And so this spring job will last forever. So it's not a total, and it's not just a wrap. It's a repair, but it's a big repair. So anyway, gonna finish that. That's all I got.